My name is Michael Drake. I'm the Assistant State Engineer over Adjudication. So I manage this work of adjudication that we do. I work very closely out in these outside areas with the regional office, and so Mark Stilson is here. He's the region engineer over this area. Many of you probably know him. And then Cash also works in that in this office as well. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Is there, maybe just pull the gain down a little bit on that? I don't know. How's that? Let's see. Test. Oh, still a little bit. I know this is not plugged in, so I know it's not that. I'll just come a little closer. Maybe I'll talk a little bit quieter. All right. Sounds a little bit better. Okay. Let's see. Introductions. And then we also have Gordon Rowe, who is an attorney that works with us in adjudication. And then John Hagewood, one of my engineers that I work with, and he's playing the role of DJ tonight. This is where and other duties as assigned comes in with our engineers. So anyway, okay. So here to talk about Moab South Subdivision, Area 5, Book 5 of the Southeastern Colorado River Adjudication. All right. So this is what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We're going to go back through the adjudication process. If you've been to one of our public meetings in the past, we've talked about this before. But the good thing here is we're going to basically talk about how we're nearly complete. So that's good. We'll go through the proposed determination, the different parts of it. We'll talk about what to do if your recommendation isn't what you expected. There is a way to object to this, and we can reconsider that. We'll talk about the hydrographic survey map. We'll talk about how to access all of this, and then we're here for your questions. So, digging into the adjudication process, if you've been to one of our prior meetings or looked at it online or on YouTube, then you've probably seen this matrix before. This is the adjudication process, and with my next click of the button, you'll see that we are nearly complete. So we started this particular subdivision back in 2018 with a notice and a summons. If you were around at that time, that's probably when you got that in the mail and you're like, what the heck is going on? Because it's a summons, it's a legal summons. We held a public meeting after this. There was a notice to file claims. All of you guys submitted claims. A list of unclaimed rights, those rights that we had of record that were not claimed, we put on that. We petitioned the court to abandon those rights. Those were abandoned. We've been working ever since investigating claims, and we published a proposed determination back in April 21 of this year. And right now we're in the midst of a 90-day objection period. Again, so if there's something in your right that you don't agree with, now's the time, and you've got 90 days from April 21st to object. Doing the math on that, you can see the date that comes up there in red, July 20th. That's the end of the 90-day objection period. So if you are going to object, you need to object before then. Okay, and then public meeting today, that's what we're doing right now. And so what's going to happen after today is at the end of the 90-day objection period, we're going to look and see what objections we have, and we're going to attempt to resolve those. Once we resolve those objections, we'll petition the court for a final decree. That's the end of the road. We're done at that point. And so that'll be a great day when we get there. Okay, let's go through quickly all the parts of the proposed determination so that we can get on to the point where you can ask some questions. So it's broken up into these parts that you see here. Let's look at the title page real quickly. Some important information is on this title page. You have the district court, so the district court that has jurisdiction over this adjudication. In this case, it's the 7th District Court. So that is where you would file your objection if you have one. All right, this is the description of the general adjudication, and very importantly, the civil case number. This is the civil case number you would use if you were to file an objection. And this is the Hydrographic Division and Subdivision name, so the Moab Division, the Moab South Subdivision, and then the area book and numbers. That's all on the front page. The next page is the notice to water users. This has some of the same information that we've already talked about. There's the civil case number. And this is probably the most important part on this if you were to file an objection. This is your instructions on filing that. They need to be filed with the district court. They don't have to be, super professional or anything. We get some that are handwritten. And so if you need to file an objection, we're happy to walk you along that path. We're ultimately trying to get this right. And so if you need some help, let us know, but we'll walk you through that. But it doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't necessarily need to have an attorney even to do that. All right, moving on. This is what we call the preamble to the proposed determination. And it's a long section. I'm not going to go through every section in detail. It's probably beyond what the purpose of this meeting is, but I do want to draw attention to a couple key parts of this. One is what we call it's a prior decree section of the preamble. We have 2 decrees in this Moab South Subdivision. The Mill Creek has a decree on it, and so it has some special provisions relating to that. And then also the Pack Creek has some very special provisions related to several prior decrees that govern how water is used on Pack Creek. Just out of curiosity, do we have anyone that is under Pack Creek decree in the audience at all? Yes? Okay, one, good. All right, so I'll go ahead and go through this next phase and make sure that you understand what is done here. If you have more questions on this, we're happy to talk more. So Pack Creek decree. So some background considerations on this is the Pack Creek decree. This is an old decree that was implemented, and it established a turn-based system. Is my mic still working? It felt like it dropped out. There we go. Okay, sorry. It established a turn-based system wherein the lower users diverted 7 out of 10 days, and then the upper users diverted 3 out of 10 days. So as we came in here and did this adjudication, we had to decide how to implement this into our water rights system. And so that's one thing that we worked with. And then we also had to account for some forfeited and abandoned water rights that were previously part of this Pack Creek decree. And so jumping into the solution is laid out in that preamble section that I pointed to. But what was decided in this case is that we would maintain that turn-based system for Pack Creek. And namely, that what this means is that the lower users would have 7 out of 10 days of Pack Creek, and the upper users would have 3 out of 10 days. We also established a duty flow rate of 1 CFS per 50 acres of irrigation. And this is the face value of the water rights that you'll see that are Pack Creek decree rights. In addition to that, and to reflect what was awarded in that Pack Creek decree, we also implemented a carrier water provision, wherein 6 CFS of water is permissible for the lower users during their 7 out of 10 days, and 6 CFS of water is available for upper users on their 3 out of 10 days. So that's a quick summary of that. Again, if you have more questions on that, we're happy to go into more detail on that, but we'll jump on from here just to get through this part. Okay, so continuing into the proposed determination, the next big part you'll see is the location map. This is the area that was adjudicated. That Spanish Trail Road kind of delineates the north and the south subdivisions, and then generally kind of parallels Highway 191 down to, and I had to look this up, looks like milepost 113 on the highway, and then it generally follows and includes all of Pack Creek and Mill Creek drainages. So that's the area that we adjudicated. Now moving on to the actual PD, the breakdown of the rights, the first section you'll see is a priority schedule. And what this does is list the water rights according to their source and list them in order of priority date. So if there's, as you know, in the state of Utah, it's a prior appropriation state. Whoever was there first gets their water first, and then after that, we go down and fill the later water rights. And so this document, this part of the proposed determination, lets us do that if needed. This is described similar to how you'll see a lot of different parts of the proposed determination. You'll see the source listed here, and then the priority date, and then the flow rate, either in CFS, or let's see, sorry, the quantity of water, either in flow rate or volume, which is acre feet. You'll also see the water right number, and then the owner of record. Okay, moving along, this is a typical page from the proposed determination. And you'll see it has a lot of the same information you'll see on a lot of water rights forms and databases. You'll see the water right number. You'll also see the name of the owner of record. All right, now I'm going to take a pause right here real quick, because one of the most common questions we get is people will turn to their water right number and they'll see that their name is not there. All right, this is very common. It's important to understand that in the adjudication, we don't update title. And so what we'll do is we'll show the water right in the most recent owner of record. All right, and so if that's not in your name, or if it's not in the name you expected, you may have some title update work you need to do. And so we can help you with that. Mark can help you with that. Cash can help you with that. We can walk you through the process. To answer it very quickly, what you're going to have to do is submit what's called a report of conveyance and include the deeds that convey the water from the owner of record to you or to whoever should be the owner of that water right. Okay? We're happy to go into more detail later on. All right, the next thing you'll see is the type of right and the quantity of water, and then the priority date and the source. And then moving along here, you'll see the point of diversion. This is where the water is taken from the natural source. This might be a diversion from a creek. This might be a spring. This might be a well. So this describes where that is and what that diversion is, what type of diversion that is. Moving along, this is where we describe the beneficial uses of the right, what it's used for. And each water right has a water use group that contains these beneficial uses. In this case, this water right is the sole provider for these beneficial uses. Sometimes you can have multiple water rights provide for a group of uses. Fortunately, this is a very simple case, and so we won't go into that. If you have questions about that, if you see that on your water right and you have questions, we're happy to answer those questions, help you understand what's going on. Water use groups can be very, very complicated. All right, next you'll see the nature of use. This water right is for irrigation. And you can see here that we go into greater detail. We describe the period of use. We describe how much how much irrigation can be done. That's the sole supply. And then sometimes where there's other water rights being used, you could have a different group total. In this case, I believe they're the same, right? Yes. All right, moving along, the next thing we describe is the place of use. And we give the section, township, and range of where this water right is used. And then we break that section into quarter sections, and we describe in those quarter sections where that place of use is occurring. All right, the next section, and this is the scary section. Hopefully you didn't have a water right end up on this, but this is one thing that we do look for in adjudication. There are some rights that are forfeited. And so we have a listing of those rights in the proposed determination. And these are described similar to what you've seen on a lot of different parts of the proposed determination. There's the water right number, the owner of record, and the point of diversion and the source. And so these rights will, upon completion of that of the objection period, if we don't receive an objection on these rights will be permanently forfeited by the court. All right, and then finally, right here at the end, we have the alphabetic index. This is a nice way to interface with the proposed determination. Clearly, searching water right numbers is kind of a pain, and so you can search for your name and find out what page you're on, and this is described similar to what we've already seen. Owner of record, the point of diversion source, the water right number, and then the page on which you'll find that water right number. All right, simultaneously to the proposed determination, we published a hydrographic survey map set. And what this is it is a record of everything that we found in the course of our review. And so we'll just jump through this. There's some basic mapping sort of information, north arrow and scale, and then we have a legend and a map location that helps you identify where you are in the map set. And then as you get into the maps, you'll see each of the areas that were identified. These are irrigated areas, and they are organized by those water use group numbers. And I know, again, this is where it can get complex. In many cases, a single water right provides for a water use group. Sometimes we have multiple water rights that provide for this. If you need help understanding a water use group on your water right, we're happy to help you understand that. Okay, coming to a close here, so let's just talk about how to access it. Hopefully you've all gotten your hands on it. We sent notice to a lot of different people, all of the water right owners that were listed on the records of the state engineer, any of the claimants who submitted claims in the Moab South Adjudication, registered agents, and councils of record that we had record of in the court. And you can access the proposed determination at these links that you see here, as well as the hydrographic survey map. You can also get a copy printed at the district court, and we can provide a copy for you as well at our offices. And so that kind of brings us to the close of the formal presentation. If you have questions, we're happy to answer them today. For those that are viewing this later, you can also email me or call Mark. We're happy to answer those questions for you. And so, with that, we'll kind of just go on to any questions that there might be. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So if you file a claim, does that mean you are exempt from the new proposal, or if there's enough claims against it, the entire proposal goes out?
Well, what's that? An objection?
Objection?
Yeah, if you file an objection.
So say that again with objection, sorry.
So if I file an objection to the Seventh District Court, would there be a possibility of my property not having to get the new reduction, or if there's enough objections for the entire area?
Okay, good question. So what we're doing right here tonight has nothing to do with like bigger basin issues. We're identifying the individual water rights and quantifying them for what they're good for. And so that's what's been published in this proposed determination. And so the objections we refer to would be if you, as a water right holder, look at your water right and see that something was missed. Maybe we missed 100 animals that you provide stock watering for, and that was just left off your water right. That's when you would want to object and say, hey, state engineer's office, you missed this. And then we would then begin to talk and coordinate, and if that's a legitimate objection, then we would come to an agreement to modify the proposed determination. So it sounds like, an objection, so that's the type of objection, I guess, is what I'm referring to is if you have an objection to a specific water right in this situation.
Mike,
Go ahead, Cash.
I think the question is if you get enough objections, can the entire decree just go away and fall through with this?
Okay.
That's the
If that's a question, then no. We will just handle each objection one by one and work our way through them, and ultimately work towards having a proposed determination that describes all of the water rights in this area. So, sorry if I didn't. Thank you. Thanks, Cash. Any other questions?
How does a new water right for the subdivision, given the fact that it's a new water right, how does that usurp the existing water rights in terms of quantity In other words, like, we're all diminished, we're all losing our water right to some degree, on some extent, but this is a new allocation. How does that walk on the old water rights?
So these are not new allocations. Any of the rights that are described in this proposed determination, these are all existing, what we call perfected water rights. And so these are, in many cases, and if I jump back real quickly to that first page of the priority schedule, you'll see some of the priority dates on these go way back into the 1800s. These are old water rights. So I think you can probably see here. So this one that is highlighted is an 1884 water right out of Barber Spring. And then there are others, 1903 out of Gardner Spring, and 1890 out of Horse Creek, and 1890 out of Mill Creek. So these are very, very old water rights. All right, and so the adjudication goes through and evaluates each of these existing, what we call perfected water rights. These are not applications to appropriate. I know we have some applications to appropriate down in this area that are pending that you still need to submit proof on. These water rights are not like that. These water rights have been around since the 1800s or early 1900s, many of them. There are some that come into more recent years, but they all have to be perfected for us to have looked at them. So these water rights are not displacing anything. They are the water rights that are the foundation of water use in this area. Go ahead, Cash, yeah.
And so, I don't know if this helps answer your question. So we may have, so as part of the adjudication, we had to come out and do a field review to verify the information that was given to us. And we may have found, when we did the field review, that there wasn't as much use as what was on the record or what was claimed. So you may have been reduced. But a common misconception is that if we take water from someone else, we hand it out to another person. That is not the intent of the adjudication. The intent is to update the record and to reflect, as Mike just said, any water rights that we know are perfected and in use, we just want to go and make sure that they're still there. And then as far as new appropriations go, those are evaluated on their own merits per application that is given to us. And there's nothing that we say, because the adjudication did this, it now determines what we can do on a new application. We have to follow policy and state statute when looking at new applications. Yeah.
And if I'll jump up on my soapbox for a minute and kind of preach about the value of adjudication. We know Moab is going through an extreme growth phase, right? And water is a very big concern. You can't manage your water resource without knowing what's there right now. And so what the adjudication goes through and does is identify who is there and who's using water right now, organizes the base. Where are we right now? And then we can go do studies, and studies have been done, and we can compare that to what the studies say the water is available, and say, okay, can we appropriate more water, or do we need to stop that? Those are some of the decisions that are going to be entertained and made in the coming years. But we now have the base. We know where we are now. We have a basic understanding of who's using water and how much.
So after your field review, how was that new water right calculated? How do you look at, my personal right is to reduce it by almost a full acre foot or a little more. Just curious on how that number came about and where the calculation came from.
Okay, and maybe it'd be best to answer that in detail, look at your water right in detail, and so we can do that. Stick around, we can hop on my computer, Cash can walk you through it. Let's answer that in detail, okay? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just clarity on the application to appropriate. That means that's the type of right under here. It's saying type of right, application to appropriate. What does that mean?
Okay. What that means, and so that is what your water right says? Okay. What that means is that you or someone, some years before, filed an application to appropriate with the state engineer's office, effectively asking permission to drill a well or to divert from a spring or something like that. That was approved, presumably, and then you or someone submitted a proof of beneficial use at some point, documenting that you had gone diverted the water as you proposed in the application, and then a certificate of beneficial use was given to you at that time, or to your predecessor. Now, we've come in and we've evaluated and said, yep, sure enough, they're doing exactly what was said in that certificate, and we're going to recommend that as such in the PD, in the proposed determination. And ultimately, we're working towards getting a decree of that right, which is the final kind of permanent status of a water right.
Okay, so with that, because it would have been whoever applied for that when they built our subdivision. When we bought the house, part of that price was getting that water right. So what you're saying is that the court at some point can come in and take that financially away from us without compensation?
Water rights fundamentally belong to the state of Utah as a whole. All of us jointly together as citizens of the state of Utah. And we each, when we use water, we have to file a permit with the state engineer's office to be able to use that water. In the state of Utah, water is scarce, and so this is a very common way of administering water in western states. And so this is how it's done in the state of Utah. That since it's such a scarce resource, you have to come in and make an application for it. And if you don't use your water right, it could be subject to forfeiture. If you don't use it to the full extent that was previously authorized, it could be subject to a partial forfeiture. And so this is all laid out in statute, and we can talk with you in more detail on your situation, but that is part of owning a water right, is that you need to continue to use it, and if you cease to use it, partially or wholly, it can be forfeited.
So that financial investment, though, could disappear because the state decides they want to take it for some reason. Essentially, that's what's going on.
It is, but it is in statute. This is a condition of all water rights.
Sure, but that's never been addressed in the sale of properties. When they sell a property, nobody's talking about that the state can come take this away. And so how come that's not made clear when everybody or anybody or new subdivisions are unfolding? How come that's not made clear through real estate agents?
That's a good question, and it would definitely be a great thing for more real estate agents and more real estate professionals to become more educated on water rights.
Right, because I think what's happening here is that a lot of people like us, we bought our house because we see what's happening to the American West.
Yeah.
So when we thought we were buying a water right, and then we're told we have to hook up to city water, but we still felt like we owned the water right. But what could happen, 10 years, 20 years, you could just come and take it. The court, the state. That was never proposed to us when we bought the house. It was never told to us that if you buy this house, just know that this water right you're paying for will be taken away.
I understand. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, not if you're using it, and I guess that's the precondition of any forfeiture of a water right is it only happens if you're not using it. And the reason that is in statute is because it's such a scarce resource, the state of Utah wants to make sure that the water is used to the highest benefit. And so the last thing we want is to have someone that has, a ton of water rights and they just happen to get here first. Sorry. And they're just dominating control of that water. If they're not using it, then that needs to be passed along to the next person that's ready to use it. That's been a fundamental aspect of water rights from the very beginning. You can have it, you can place it to use, but if you're not ready to do it or you're not placing it to use, then the next person gets a shot. And if that person can't do it, then the next person gets a shot. And that's always how it's worked from the very, very beginning. And that's just to ensure that this resource, which is a public resource, can be placed to the best use. I think it might be my laptop.
I think also noting that, you know, the state is managing water because it owns that and it's giving the right to people to use it, ought to be stepping in and talking to these counties or cities that are wanting to expand 7,000 more people into this valley, because essentially it takes our water right. Essentially, everybody's in agreement blindly saying, oh yes, let's build more homes, let's, you know.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense that if you're working on this project, you're not also coming to the city here and saying, no, you're not going to build units that will allow 7,000 more people into this valley.
Interestingly, this came up in the legislature this last session, and some legislation was passed that starts us along. There hasn't previously been a connection between water management and land use. And that connection is beginning to be forged and implemented by the legislature, that is going to require that, because land use regulation is the purview of counties and cities, right? The state doesn't get involved in that. We manage water rights. We manage, we do water planning, but we don't get into land use planning. The state of Utah doesn't. That's always been the purview of the local entities. And the thinking there is that local people are going to have a better idea of what to do with land and how to manage it than people up in Salt Lake are, right? And that's generally been the thinking and the understanding. You know, you definitely might differ with that, right? Sometimes you definitely don't agree with decisions made by your local planning commissions and zoning boards, but there was some legislation that was passed this last year to require that water be considered as part of the land use process. And so I think we're starting to see some changes there. Yes, sir.
Because of all this forfeited water right, will that, I can see that I'll kind of create a slush fund for the state. That all of this say-so on all this water that was previously controlled, for them to sell or give to any kind of developer that comes around. It's just kind of part of the legislature's scheme is to take advantage of this water that's become available now and sell it out to developers.
No, and that's not what happens at all. And if you think about it, these water rights, it's not like we picked them up and took them somewhere to do anything with. These have not been used probably for a long time, these forfeited water rights. And so it's actually a benefit, if you are a water user, it's actually a benefit to get these off the books right now. Because these, if left on the books, could come back in at some point, and that might impair you at some future point. So a forfeited right just flat out disappears. It is no longer a water right. It doesn't go into a fund or some sort of category that's used to give out to anyone. It doesn't work that way. Like I talked about earlier, we're doing this adjudication so we understand a baseline idea of who's using water and how much is there. Mark is going to be now begin the process of figuring out, okay, now we have this baseline. What do we need to do? What do we need to do to better manage this resource? And so he's going to begin looking at studies and figuring out, is there a change in policy we need to make here? And he'll make recommendations to the state engineer along those lines. But those forfeited water rights, those are just off the books now. They're no longer water rights. And anyone that wanted to try and appropriate more water is going to have to go through the same process that anyone else would. And I think our policy right here is what? What is the policy?
So the whole southeastern section of Utah, the whole Colorado River basin for that matter, is closed to new large appropriations. The only thing that you can get for a new appropriation anywhere within the Colorado River basin, all of southeastern Utah, is what we call a small domestic. And that would just be for small homeowners, up to 6.73 acre feet of water in this area represent a home, a little bit of irrigation, a little bit of storage. So we're already restricted, but we will probably close the area to new appropriations here in the next few years. Because of what we're seeing in the adjudication and how little water there is left to develop from the groundwater resources, we will probably recommend to the state engineer to look at closing the valley to new appropriations at some point. So just bear that in mind. That's kind of where we're headed.
Yes,
I have
sir.
another question. The irrigation piece of the water right, I noticed that there's a standard. I think, this is the question, is that diminishment or that allocation, is that per area of your property? And is that, if so, is that diminishment equal for all parties, for all?
You speak of a diminishment. I'm not sure what you're referring to in that
Well,
case.
I mean, we've got, so like I've got an EDU for my house and I've got 0.18 acre feet or something for irrigation. I don't know what it was before. I just had 1.6 acre feet before, so I don't know what was allocated to what. My question is, that irrigation piece, 0.18, it struck me as that was an irrigation as a right as a function of as a function of area. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what we did when we came out and looked at your water right, we looked at it and we found, presumably in your case, we found 0.1 acres of land that was being irrigated. And so that's what we used to define your water right. That's the number you see listed under your water right with your 1 EDU. And then every area has a duty. There could be one of a couple duties. I mean, what's most likely? It's 6 acre feet down in the valley. And so you would take that 0.1 times 6, 0.6 acre feet of water, add your 1 EDU, and that's your sum total of water. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's standard. That is, it's a duty for a reason. We use that everywhere within the area that is that duty value. Another question up here, yes?
Is it possible to sell your water right?
Is it possible to sell your water right? Yeah, definitely.
So you don't have to have any kind of be using the water at all on it to sell the water right.
Well, all water users, it's part of owning a water right that you need to use your water. This adjudication came through and did a one-time snapshot view of were you or weren't you using your water. And if a water right, if I was a buyer of a water right, the first thing I would look at is I would look to make sure that whoever was selling it to me had been using it, because that can raise all sorts of issues depending on what I wanted to do with that water right. If I wanted to move it somewhere else, then the state engineer may look at that non-use and say, I don't think so. I don't think you can move it. So that'd be the first thing I'd look for, is to make sure that it was in use. But to answer your base question, yeah, you certainly can sell any water right. Sure.
So were these water rights that were forfeited not sold? Someone decided they didn't have any value?
No, they were just not in use. We went out and evaluated it, and we found that they just were not in use. There was no beneficial use at all. No irrigation, no stock watering, no EDUs, no houses, nothing. Nothing was being done with it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does Strand County, San Juan County get in that like Iowa, where you have to buy water rights, like you guys?
Yeah.
You're not issuing any permits up in that country. You gotta buy.
So that's what Mark is suggesting, is that, I mean, as areas develop, that is what tends to happen, is at some point the area is closed to new appropriations. And I used to actually manage the Twila area, and so I believe that happened in the early 90s, if I remember right. And they closed it, and now you have to buy and move it, right? And then that started to become a problem, and so everyone was wanting to move to the east side of the valley, and so we had to implement a policy that limited how far you could move it. And you're probably familiar with some of this.
The water can be worked on the ground, so keep
Yeah, and so this is how water is managed. We have to make sure that we don't exceed the water that we have here. So, yes, sir.
So if you're either buying or selling a water right, does the state act as the agent between them to verify that it's a sellable thing, or do we just take your chances?
Yeah, we don't at that time. The only thing you need to do in a sell is make sure that whoever's buying it needs to come in and update title with our office.
We do suggest you come check with us. If you're buying water rights or buying land with water, give us a call, come in and do a little bit of research. And we can provide you with all the information related to the history of the road.
Yeah. And good point. I mean, we do have the information that can be used to figure out where it should be used, and then you can kind of research it yourself and see. Yeah.
So do you have manuals or information on your websites that a water right owner could refer to, and the buyer could refer to? It spells out the rules,
Yes.
or the things to look for?
Yep, in fact, on our frequently asked questions, that's one of the first questions is, if I'm buying a water right,
How do I know if it's a good one?
how do I know if it's a good one?
Yeah. All water rights are unique, and so it's really hard to give any general sort of guidelines, and there's all sorts of details that could come into play. So really the best way in any situation like that is contact us, and we can help you understand what's going on, understand where the water right is, and give you an indication of what problems there might be if you were to purchase that water right. But I guess to answer, I mean, we don't stand as an agent between it. That's not. But we are the holder of the information of all the water right files, and so we can help you navigate those certainly. Any other questions? Okay, maybe I know we've got some detailed questions. Maybe we'll go ahead and just stop the recordings.